Well, we're up to 8, having skipped 6 and 7. I'm going to talk now about my memories of my mother. You might want to check out a separate CD that I was fortunate enough to record with her, perhaps 10 years before she passed along. She speaks very well for herself, and I'll try to throw in some more detail. She was a stay-at-home mother, so was always available to talk, and I guess we did a fair amount of that. She read a lot and encouraged my reading, introducing me to famous authors while I was still quite young. She was always happy and contented, and warm and loving, with lots of ideas for activities for me and my younger sister, Janet. Though we didn't really need much of a stimulus, we didn't know the meaning of boredom. She would coach me in how to respond to my dad's demands, which were sometimes pretty heavy, perhaps when I was probably 8 or 10 years old. I remember her saying, you know you're going to have to do what he tells you to when he leaves and leaves a agenda of items to be accomplished. My tendency was apparently to talk about my inability to get it all accomplished before he came home again. She would say, just say yes, Dad, and do your best on the thing. Otherwise, you get him all in an antagonized state. Well, I hope I learned some of that. On our car trips to Florida, she was always very, very happy, and both Mom and Dad would sing together the state songs as we drove through them, and I soon learned to join in. The Daniel family were just ecstatic when we rolled into the yard. Dad must have called ahead with our ETA, or expected time of arrival, because they were all there, even after they were married and had their own families, and brought them on over. So that was a real big thing for us. In my junior years, she would get together, and I would enjoy with her the Reader's Digest features of improving one's vocabulary and other quizzes that we would take, as well as the jokes. Dad was more activity-oriented, so I expect she often eased him off when I preferred to read or even just be lazy, such as, I remember her telling me that once I had gone out in the canoe and was just sitting out in front of the camp in the canoe, and I remember I was quite an observer. I didn't have to always be doing things. I'd be watching the wildlife along the shore just toward the camp. And yet he would ask her, do you think there's something wrong with that boy? He's not doing anything. And she understood me a little better and said, no, that's okay. He'll do enough when he gets going, but right now it looks like he's in an observing mode. She was a very good sport and always was ready to try something new with Dad. She would go with him fishing and hunting before I was big enough to go along. There was a hunting story of both of them getting hunting licenses and for deer hunting and they'd go hunt together. I remember her dressing up in some real heavy-duty hunting clothes, big boots, and multiple layers of wool clothing. Wool was good because when you walked, there was no sound of the cloth rubbing on itself. And at any rate, I guess my dad shot a deer, and then he had Mom come up fairly close to it and shoot it again, so that she could claim that as her deer. And when they took it in, the game warden said, "Well, that's a pretty big hole in the neck there." Because I think Mom had a shotgun and Dad was using a rifle. At any rate, this allowed him to continue hunting with his unused license. And I guess they did that more than one occasion. I don't think she ever was the primary hunter. There was another time when I was getting to be a secondary hunter, and Mom was with us, and she had a cold and was tending to cough. Our method of moving through the woods was supposed to be as silent as possible, and I had learned how to place my feet and avoid sticks and things as we moved along, creeping through the woods like we thought maybe Indians had perfected. And she'd come along as the third one, and we'd hear her cough, and that was very annoying to Dad. But the first time he just suggested that maybe she should just go home. But she wanted to stick with us, and so we continued a bit more, and sure enough, she coughed again, and Dad turned around and said, "Go home." She thought it was funny, and so I did too. And we made a little farther before another cough, and both of us turned around and said, "Go home." And then we stopped and said, it really would be better. So she turned around and headed back to the camp, which wasn't too far. We hadn't gotten very far up the Cedys River Road, Cedys Lake Road, actually. On our winter outings, Dad and later all of us would help some, but he did most of the work in clearing snow off of a large area in front of the pond where we could skate. And I remember Mom skating with us on the lake, so this had to be something she had learned after getting married and coming to this Northland. In the summer, I remember picnics, again at our place on the lake, and starting with the Sunday school picnic. She had a very steady personality. I never saw her really down, but recall that she had said all she really needed after a long winter was a new hat to give her a boost. Once she even worked in the ladies' clothing store to buy some extra hats and clothes. I don't think there was any real need, but this was how she wanted to go at it. She was a member of a number of ladies' groups. One was the Daughters of St. Anne's, and St. Anne's Church, that was. And the Eastern Star, which is kind of like the ladies' Masons. And she was a member of Bridge Club that often met at our house. I remember Janet and I sneaking down the stairs to halfway position ourselves so we could hear what the discussions were at the ladies' bridge club. My dad's family were very close, like hers. So much of the time, there was a lot of mutual support with them. Sunday school teaching was one of her activities. She was in the altar guild, and I recall the church suppers as being a big thing about once a month. This must have been during the winter when things got pretty tied up in the cold and snow. I remember another interesting thing. She would read the newspapers, and then when Dad came home for lunch, and we came home for lunch also, she would summarize it all for all of us, and this was how we kept up with the current events and local information. She learned to cook, telling us that she hadn't ever learned until she got married. It was simple fare that Dad liked, plus cakes, cookies, and pies, and a Danish favorite that was called femmerskyer, which really means a 5-penny cake. I discovered later on, we just rolled it all together, femmerskyer. They both made venison mincemeat together. This was a combination of all kinds of stuff that was in a huge pot with, so I guess, some molasses and some raisins and of course the venison. So this really had meat in there, mincemeat, and this was used to make pies through the coming winter. Canning was also a big thing every year, and also became a kind of a family occasion, getting all the equipment ready and sterilized, and then getting all the different vegetables. I remember in particular beans. We always had a lot of beans that were the green beans and yellow beans, not the baked beans. That was another item altogether. She always encouraged education, and Dad did too, but she seemed to know all about the different colleges and helped me to check them out when I was in the choosing process. She even steered me in my social contacts and nearly kidnapped me at the end of my senior year at Miami Senior High School when I was very sweet on a real nice girl. I had thought I was going to have one last date with this girl before we left for Maine, and all of a sudden she announced that we were leaving the next morning. There was no discussion about it. We were leaving. So maybe, who knows what she saved me from there. In my college years, she was more focused on my sister a lot. I guess she had some health problems. That's my sister. And when I came home, I was spoiled a bit too. As a high schooler, I had developed a pattern of going into my parents' bedroom after a basketball game or a date, laying across the foot of the bed while they pulled their feet up and talking about it. So it's been kind of fun for me. Even in college, when I came home, I would do that, and a couple of times in my later years after I had my own family, I would pop in on them that way, and it was just a fun thing to reminisce about. I recall Mom's tolerance of my long-winded stories. Even when I was starting to play golf, I would come home and probably in my junior high school time recite all the details of the 18 holes of golf. And she'd never say anything. Always happy to hear about it. Both my parents were always proud and supportive of my achievements. My own family, later on. She was always strong in her faith and said she was a, quote, closet Christian, end quotes, when I was very interested in the evangelical view of things. She reminded me of her Baptist roots and said when she was about high school age, she would go to these services where they talk about being called on some mission halfway around the world, and she was scared to death that she might be called. And she would pray that she not be called. And she came to see the idea that one is already halfway around the world from somewhere, so give your best efforts where you are. I've sort of adopted that approach myself as the years went on, and feel that's about where I am now. She has bonded exceptionally with my second wife. I think they had a lot in common. Another buoyant personality with many of the same characteristics, and I remember them both talking about learning to drive and the accidents they had. One time she said she was early driver. She saw there was a ditch ahead and thought all she had to do was speed up and she would fly right over it. But as expected, that didn't work. That struck us all as pretty funny. Speaking of funny, she became very blunt and funny in her last years after my dad had passed on. For instance, she would come live with us for a couple of weeks, and I remember a couple of times she'd say, "It's 5 o'clock. Isn't anybody going to eat around here?" Another time, we had candles on the table, and she says, "I can't see. Turn on the lights." We were taking her out to a Cracker Barrel, which was out of the edge of Naples. It took probably a good 20 minutes, maybe longer, to get there from where we live in the mornings, and we were out there maybe 15 minutes or so, and she says, "What are you doing? You're taking me all the way back to Miami?" So this is the kind of thing that became more and more frequent. I recall she spent a month with us in Rhode Island on our cottage there. After I had retired. Yes, we had retired, and we still had plans to go sailing, and she wasn't interested in that. So she stayed at the house, and we were away maybe 10 days. And when we came back, she had made friends with a number of the neighbors, and they had really quite a social gathering going on around there between the beach and just a lot of talking, I guess. Nothing organized. But she was very sociable. And that really never changed to her last year.